much for joining me. It's Debra Rosenbach, and today I'm going to do a painting of a field of very colorful poppies. I'm going to be using 100% cotton paper, and my choice of paper that I have in front of me is a block that's 18 by 24, and it's a Fabriano. And the stuff is fabulous. I do like it, and I'll probably be ordering more of this. I think I got it at Jerry's Artorama. And in order to achieve this kind of painting that I'm going to do today, to use like a Canson, just a regular watercolor paper from Canson, or let's say Strathmore, you're not going to get the same kind of effect. You're going to get a lot of puddling. You're going to need 100% cotton paper, and I can get into that a little bit more with you as we progress in this painting tutorial. So right now I am getting all my paints down, and the one that I'm going to work on with you right now, as you see this coming into play, is I got a little bit of that paint on this paper, and it's kind of setting the starting point to where this is going to go. But I am using the Van Gogh quinacridone purple red, and I'm activating that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just put some shapes down on the paper. And these are just kind of random shapes. Nothing, I'm not like looking at a photograph or anything. This is just random shapes. And I'm using the rose also, the quinacridone rose. And as you can see, some of them are have a little bit more pigment, and others are very washed out, muted. And I want that variation in tonal values. Now I'm going in with some of the Azo yellow light. And you're going to have to forgive me here. It might be a little bit hard to see the yellow right now because I had a little problem when it came to when the video was completed. I noticed that things were really dark. And today is a very gloomy, rainy day here in Florida, and there's a lot of shadows. The lighting was horrible, so I had to bump up in editing. I had to bump up the light, which kind of washed things out a little bit. So you're going to see the lighting is a little bit on the brighter side in washing the colors out. So forgive me for that. I couldn't control it really. Or you would have got a really dark video, and we didn't want that. So I'm just going around the edges of the shapes that I put down, and I'm kind of loosening them all up. What I'm trying to create is a looseness and also kind of a blurred effect. I want there be a little bit of a juxtaposing position here between focus and blurriness. Okay, so that's what's happening here. Okay, now I've got a palette knife, and I'm going to get that to come into play. I have a pointy one. I'm not using a palette knife that has a rounded edge. I've got one that has a point, and I'm using the one that has the point specifically for targeted areas. It allows me to get that point exactly where I want it at the base of a flower. Okay, you see I'm putting it right kind of like where a base of the flower would be. And also it'll help me later, and I'll point that out of to why I also use the pointed tip palette knife. And I'm not taking it from the base of the flower and taking it all the way to the ground. Okay, as you can see, some of these lines are very short. They're broken up. I don't want one continuous long line. Okay, again, I'm looking for that atmospheric kind of blurred aesthetic here. Now I basically have the foundation of my painting right now. Now I'm going to have to go in and I'm going to have to start loosening up those stems that I put in, because again, I'm looking for that kind of blurred, loose effect. So everywhere I put that sap green, I'm just gonna loosen it up and let it kind of, because the paper is getting wet, it's gonna blur out. And now I put some of that sap green that's very watered down into my quill, and I'm kind of just sprinkling it around the base there where all the stems would be going to the ground. And once those little spots, they'll start dispersing in into the paper and softening up. Same thing's going to happen here. I'm dropping in some of the purple and just sprinkling it in and letting that 100% cotton paper kind of absorb it, and then it kind of like blends out. Now, if you're using just a regular, inexpensive watercolor paper, let's say it's a Canson not Canson Heritage, that's 100% cotton, a Canson or a Strathmore, that pigment is going to just sit there until it dries. It's not going to absorb into the paper very much. It'll absorb to a certain point, but not like 100% cotton paper will. So you'll get this kind of, if you're looking for the effect of what I'm doing, you're going to have to work with 100% cotton paper. And sometimes you might think, oh God, I don't have money for that. Actually, it's not expensive. And you're going to get better paint. You're going to definitely get better paintings by using that kind of paper. So I highly suggest it. I mean, I still buy some of the Strathmore and use it once in a while. But for the most part, it's not my go-to at all. And now what I'm doing is I'm doing thirsty brush work, and that means that I'm going in with my quill and I'm picking up the puddles that I'm finding on the paper. The paper's starting to ripple a little bit, even though it is on a, it's on a, oh, what do you call it? I've completely lost what I want to say. You know, it's the gum block. Okay, it's on a block and it's starting to ripple. And that's going to happen when things get really wet. But I have to control those puddles, because if I don't control those puddles, as they dry, they're going to dry in odd shapes, or they're going to have hard edges on them. So I have to go in and I have to grab that. So I'm always looking for puddles. They need to be picked up. Now I'm going in with my olive green. And as you can see, is I'm kind of looking for bases of flowers where I could drop in where the base of the flower and the stem would be. And I'm dropping that in. And now I'm not doing that on every area. I'm just looking for key flowers that I want to bring forward, because you have to think there's going to have to be some in the background, and they don't necessarily need a stem. That's why I just threw in some sprinkles of the sap green. It's a very watered down sap green, so it didn't overpower any of the colors or make them real muddy. Again, I'm still going in and I'm adding some more of that sap green. Now I'm putting down some Dusk Green from Van Gogh. Now Dusk Green it granulates really nicely, and it breaks up into different kind of pigments. You'll see kind of a turquoise blue color to it. It's green, but then it goes blue on you, kind of turquoise blue. And it's really beautiful. It's very atmospheric. It's very much like Cascade Green, which I love. I didn't like it when I first used it. You might find a couple videos where I was a little weird about it, but then when I used it in the proper way, I fell in love with it. And that's what I'm really liking about this Dusk Green. It's a definitely, I will always have it in my arsenal of paints at all times because the stuff is great. And I like the Dusk Yellow. They're good. I would just, trust me, get them if you want neat effects to happen in your paintings. So I did put some of that into play. And as you can see, it's spreading out, and it's activating, and it's creating some really beautiful colors. And now I'm talking about why I use the pointy palette knife. I'm going into that Dusk Green, but I only feeding the pigment to the very tip of that palette knife. And I'm using that to just draw fine lines for grass or stem work. Sorry about all the paper spinning. I have to spin because if I don't spin the paper, my head would be right in the middle of the camera area. So I have to spin my paper, plus even if I'm working on a smaller sheet of paper and the camera might be a little bit closer, I still spin my paper because of my tremors that I have. I have to have control over what I'm doing, and by spinning the paper and putting it in the right position for me helps. So now I'm going in and I'm just lightly putting in some of that Dusk Green into play. Just kind of giving that that corner just a real light kind of gray blue kind of cast to it. It almost feels like a a soft sky kind of color, without it being like an intense blue, which I'm not looking for. Now I am just taking my palette knife and I'm kind of loosening things up a little bit, kind of creating a little bit more texture. Maybe there's some leaves, and this will all get softened up with some water here shortly. And I'm beating some water into my quill, and I'm going in and I'm doing just that. Now, while I am doing that, it is activating this this Dusk Green. And now you're going to see just how beautiful that color is and how atmospheric it is. It has that aqua color to it. And you didn't know that until you actually loosened up the paint. And as you can see, the painting is finally coming into focus. I'm seeing where everything is going. I'm pleased with what I'm seeing. It's got a very atmospheric feel to it. I do want to bring a sunniness into the painting, and that's going to come into play here in just a moment, and I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. And also keeping the composition of the painting interesting. Right now I have flowers that are, you know, vertical, but I'm going to pull the eye in from the top right and bring it down towards the bottom left. And that'll happen in just a few moments here. And now I'm just going a little bit with the purple and the rose, and I'm waking up the painting a little bit and adding a little bit more value to the areas and just bringing it forward. Those specific flowers, I'm bringing them forward. Adding some more sprinkles in, letting it do its little mingling. Now I'm going to work on this section that you see me getting wet. And I'm going to bring in my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Now, if you haven't used this before, it's a very opaque watercolor. And I fill up my tip of my quill with it. It's very kind of like a heavy cream consistency. And then I dip it in some water, just slightly, and fill up that quill so it gets real juicy. And then I'm able to have substantial sprinkles. They're not like fine. I'm not looking for like fine sprinkles. I'm looking for some decent size, like you can see right there. And those little pink ones, I'm going to soften those up a little bit and blur them out. So it looks like they're kind of in the background. Now that's the section that I definitely need to work on. And I'm just putting in a very loose wash of the azo yellow. It's very light in color. So that's being laid down first. Now I'm going in with the pure pigment of the azo and dropping it at the top and then going down towards the left. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to create the eye, like it's pulling in the sunlight from the top right and beaming down to the bottom left. So that's what I'm trying to create. And I'm just blending that yellow out. So the composition is the stems are all going vertical, but you do have that from the top left to the bottom top right, from the pot to the bottom left. These paintings that I do are relatively quick, but they're very effective and they're loose, and I really enjoy doing them. And I hope you guys are trying this out and seeing if it works for you. And now I'm going in and I'm drying the paper a little bit, and I'm just dispersing the air. I'm like putting my hand in front of it or a towel. So if I blow the air directly on the paper, it's going to push the pigment and make it blow away and create streaks that I don't want. That does happen up in the top right for me. It kind of gets away later in the painting, and then I end up fixing that area after I was all done with the painting. On filming, I ended up going in and touching it up. But this is where I think I kind of messed it up. I went in there and it hits it. At some point, it kind of blows it out of, just blows it out of whack. There it goes. That drove me crazy. And I'm just dropping in a little bit more of that Dusk Green. And just kind of blending out those little areas. I'm trying to create kind of the green blurred base of this painting. Now I'm going to do that with this Dusk Green, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the sap green, and then I'll top it off with some Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white.